It's the Business Owner's Guide to Money
At the intersection of your business finances and your personal finances.
with retired longtime financial advisor and author Ryan Urban. Let's get started. Here's Ryan.
And greetings. Welcome to the Business Owner's Guide to Money podcast. This is Ryan. Thank you very, very much for joining us as always. And a quick reminder about us. We work with business owners and individuals on an hourly fee basis. We provide guidance on things like asset protection and general financial guidance, investing, retirement, insurance, all that good stuff, minimizing taxation, which is, we're going to touch on that a bit today. So we look at the big picture, and you are not having to pay an ongoing percentage fee on your money. You can reach me through Alpha4Business, alpha4business.com. And again, thank you very much for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about business taxes. And in my book, The Business Owner's Guide to Money, I spend a chapter on this, and it's a big chapter because obviously it's a big issue that the business owners have. I look at this in two ways. First of all, when it comes to business taxation, when you send your information to your CPA, your tax preparer, what they're doing is they're looking at the rearview mirror. They're looking at the previous year. And so you're going to be giving them information from the previous year, and that's what they're going to take care of for you. A proactive tax preparer, proactive CPA, wants to do one more thing, and that is the reverse. Instead of looking in the rearview mirror, they want to look through the windshield. They want to look down the road. And generally that's known as tax planning. Now, tax planning can be very complicated, or it can be relatively simple. And part of tax planning is avoiding mistakes. And if you're anything like me, I've made far more than my share of mistakes when it comes to the taxes. I've been slapped around by my tax preparer more than once for this. And, that's why I know the value of it. Well, as always, we want to bring on an expert to talk about it. And Sonia Narvaez is with us. Sonia is owner of CPA Accounting. Actually, I want to make sure you have her website as well. It's cpaaccounting.biz, B-I-Z, of course, cpaaccounting.biz. Sonia, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ryan.
It's the thing about tax deductions is that we're not looking at a long list of secret magical, tax deductions out there. The number is finite. So we're looking at deductions that we need to be sure that we're taking. And I'll bet you're well aware of all of this. And when someone comes to you, Sonia, and they, a lot of times you're dealing with someone for the first time. They're a new business owner, for example, and they look at you for guidance because you're the person. What do you tell them? How do they make sure they're getting all the deductions they should have?
Okay, so for me, it is very important that the client understand the type of business that they're running. Mm-hmm. A restaurant is not the same thing as a service. And the deductions are basically what is ordinary and necessary. So it's, first of all, understanding what is that to be able to identify the expenses that you should be writing. And that's how you end up not writing off what you should. Mm-hmm. Yep. So, for example, somebody who's doing service and who's traveling around may be missing per diem. And we have found many clients that they did not take care of their per diem. It was sad. I mean, one was like $80,000 in a year. It was a lot, yes. And it made a huge difference on the bottom line. Just the first time we started looking at things. So we're looking at it for them in a proactive way rather than reactive, and more of a planning because we keep track of them. And then we have the same thing, understanding that this client has the ability to write that off. It doesn't have the same ability to write meals the same way, or food like a restaurant can.
Sure, right.
So we got to understand the basics of what do I do and what's ordinary and truly necessary. And obviously the documentation that follows to go along with it. So that is like the first rule that I say. It's about inside management, and you really got to know your business, and you really got to understand what you're doing. And with a tax professional, We do a lot of advisory tax planning in the sense of let's go look line by line and let me really look at what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Mhm.
How many offices do you have? Do you have an administrative office? Do you have how your clients, how are you working with those clients? And there's a lot of missed items. There's a lot of missed storage things. There's a lot of missed information in certain businesses. So that's the first thing I would say.
You know what I've seen a lot with my business owner clients is that they don't, it's what you don't know. And so sometimes the tax preparer will poke at them and say, well, this is just as you're saying, Sonia, you're in this industry. Therefore, I don't see anything in this column. Are you sure there's, and that's why, and another thing I preach about in my book is that you've got to have a good tax preparer and don't fake it. And by all means, don't go online and do this stuff by yourself. There's a reason people exist.
Exactly. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, so how do you communicate that with them? Do you give them any kind of a template or information, or is it something that really comes out the first time you sit and talk with them?
For the clients that are looking for that kind of help, we give them a sheet and then we sit down and we go over, again, understanding their business.
Yeah.
Very important. So we can look at the sheet, which is the guideline, and then start pulling things. One of the things that I see very often is startup costs. Mm-hmm. If it's a new company, they all forget that they have a bunch of money up to the point that the company opened that they did not write off. Granted, they'll be amortized, but still, it's money that you could really use on the first year for things that you omitted.
For example, then someone opens up a business, let's say a service-based business in October. Mm-hmm. Well, that could be a lot of money that's put out the door, especially if you have things like office supplies and your office and your marketing, your startup marketing, but you're not making any money. And I've seen this. Well, I didn't make any money until January, so I can't write anything off for that first year.
Yes. Yeah. And another big thing with that is travel. Some people have to travel to set things up. They forget about their travel expenses. They're totally part of your startup costs. Of course, as long as you haven't started the business, they forget their telephone they were using, the internet that they're using constantly, and just a lot of little things. And then we start finding out what you're doing, and then we start finding even more things.
Sure. Yeah. Then you start getting curious. You start looking for more.
Exactly. And it's actually interesting because you learn a lot about businesses and how they're running them.
Yeah.
And then we started running things off. We have a client who does a record label, and we really needed more deductions. So we're like, okay, he's got a child. He's got a little child that his wife and him just, little baby. And what we decided to do is we decided to take pictures of the child, and we made a payroll for the child. And we wrote it off, and it was perfectly legal because it was a lot of children's music.
Oh.
So it worked out beautiful. We were able to, and that's what I mean. You got to know the industry you're in. You got to understand, and it's got to be ordinary necessary. So if you're doing a record label, you put this child, and it's perfectly right. You're paying for those rights to put that and put it out there. So it's those little things, understanding your industry and talking to somebody who can put it together. That will make the final difference at the end.
Well, it's like a doctor. A doctor has to know what questions to ask, and that might be based on your physical, your health history. So, do you get a lot of questions on things like, or is one overlooked thing, something like a home tax or a home deduction for an office space at your house?
We do. We see that it's omitted a lot, or they try to use certain forms. I'm not very particularly happy using them because of the depreciation. Your primary home is not something I like to do.
Yeah.
You have to recapture that later, and it's actually that's not something I particularly like to use. However, we do notice that there's a lot of storage used up in the home, and a lot of different things that they are not using correctly. And sometimes that requires a formal discussion.
Yeah.
How are you doing it? What are you doing? What are you putting there? How's your area? And sometimes we just ask them to like maybe even open a separate area and start counting. And there's actually court cases where it has been accepted, the fact that if you put it a certain amount of storage, some people can be using a lot more than they realize. Just by storage of inventory, just by storage of whatever it is they're selling, they're doing, or it just gets very exciting how many things you can actually encounter that you can write off in the home situation. But every case is going to be different, and you have to be meticulous as to the technicalities of what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Well, when you're running a business, you're sprinting, and you just sometimes you just don't think about stuff. I'm glad you brought up depreciation recapture. Can you give us a quick idea of what that is? Because I think a lot of people, when I brought it up to people, this is the first time they had heard of it.
Oh boy. Yeah, that could really make a big difference. So I try to make it as easy of an explanation so it can be understood. So every year we take a depreciation amount on a piece of property. Okay, and that's great. What a great gift, right? Mm-hmm. The problem here is that it really lowers your taxes currently. But if you don't plan correctly, when you go sell that property, all that depreciation becomes ordinary income back into your tax return. So the important part of that would be, let's plan when we're going to sell that property. That's where the proactive part of things come, because let's say next year I have this property, I'm going to sell it, and I've got a lot of recapturing of depreciation. So now I'm like, okay, I'm going to sell this property when my income is low, when it's not really going to put me on that top dollar tax bracket.
Okay. Because it's going to happen. You're going to get taxed, so you may as well make sure that you're in a lower tax bracket.
Right. Yes. And you plan. If you plan and you proactively think about things like that, you will lower that tax liability. Who knows? Maybe you may not even owe much at all, and then you used all of that tax deduction in prior years.
Outstanding. Good. See, I this is why I do this. I learn every time, every single time. Anything else in terms of things that they really should be sure that they're taking as a deduction?
Corporations, for example, I see like the traveling, the meeting costs, legal fees, state taxations, like if they're paying to a state for whatever reason, whether it's for sales tax, sometimes they forget. One of the things that I noticed for the individual who's sprinting and does not have like a established staff, and they just put everything together at the end of the year, they miss their own payroll taxes that they paid for themselves.
Yeah.
Because so we go back and we tell them about it, and the next year they learn and they keep on going. But we see it a lot, and if somebody's not paying attention, that could be something that could be omitted. And depending on how much you're paying yourself, that really adds up. There is also R&D, research and development. There's a new thing that it's something that we all should really be understanding how it works, because it could be you do have to file forms, but if somebody is onto something new, even if it doesn't work, it's still research and development. Sure, and it's still a very nice write-off, and it's came around in the recent years to be a very big thing.
Okay.
State taxes, like I said, interest fees, bank fees, a lot of times, ATM fees.
Yeah, good.
If they're not having a software that's keeping track of it, that's doing the bank feeds automatically, they get missed a lot. It all adds up.
Okay, I'm going to segue here because that's a good place to segue. I'd like to talk about the mistakes you see that business owners make in their taxes, and I'm going to start, and I'm going to see, and you tell me if I'm right on this, because I saw this a few times, and man, oh man, I hope y'all are taking notes here because there's some things you really need to do. The one I'm thinking of is that most tax preparers have a questionnaire, and this thing will be anywhere from 3 to 10 pages, and they just ignore it. And then you Sonia, get a box of receipts and papers. And to me, that's a huge mistake they're making. They need to. I hate paperwork too. I really do. But that paperwork is so important. Do you see that often?
Yes. We try to get them to put things on a sheet with the totals, because we have found over time that if we miss something, we're not really doing, and we're like, we have so much work already in-house. It's best to recommend to the client. They bring it all like that, and we sit down and tell them, look, let's get you to put it together like this. We kind of guide them, and then we try to let them do it. I think it's best, and it's a way for the client to see themselves, what's going on.
That's a great point. And that's actually not just say that. I preach a lot about business plans. And what a business plan forces you to do is look at your business from every angle, strengths and weaknesses, the whole deal. Well, so would this. And so it can be an educational experience to go in there. And I also talk about the same thing about things like balance sheets and income statements. You can't just file them somewhere. You got to look at them, and you got to look at every line item so that you know your business inside out, regardless of what you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Other mistakes. I'm glad I was right on that one. What else do you see?
Not a lot of mixing a lot of mixing with the personal, the drive by McDonald's and the or whatever it is that their food is on the rush. So I see a lot of that, and that not only creates more work like for our end, because now we gotta continue to take this money out of the income statement, and not separating. It's a big thing. Sometimes clients will sending the work late, doing the work late, not allowing to see what's really going on and more on an ongoing basis. We get them to show up for our monthly ones, not necessarily the tax ones. They're delayed. Yeah. If you're delayed, if you think about it, how many things you really did not, you need to really think about. Sometimes even when I get delayed on some things, you go back and you say, oh my God, I can't believe I paid this or didn't do this. Yeah. And I think that's a big consequence with going back to the box of receipts. Yes. That's when we really see, what did we do? How did we do it? And then all of a sudden we could say, oh my God, this other receipt should have been in here. Mm-hmm. So nobody knows your business better than you.
And I have to admit, I have a little course. It's the Business Owner's Guide to Money. And I'm trying to remember if I put it in the book or not, but I'm trying to visualize Schedule C, because on Schedule C, which is the deductions for a business, there is a box of deductions, and it's right there. I mean, it tells you, and there's only, as I recall, there's not more than 12, 15. And if you could just come in, and here's another thing I preach about, Sonia, and that is learn Excel. If nothing else, learn Excel, and that way it'll help you organize a little bit. But there just aren't that many categories, and so if you can learn to just at least organize yourself into categories. Look, a tax preparer is not; they can't read minds. And I think that's another mistake people make, is they think, they'll find it. They'll find something. Well, wait a minute. You don't have enough information to find something, do you?
That's right. Yeah. It's very difficult to know. And again, we go with clients and we try to look at what they're doing in their business and dig and dig and dig, trying to figure it out, trying to get it. Imagine if you're just throwing a box and put it on someone's desk. Uh-huh. I mean, you're not really giving yourself a really nice break on the taxation world.
And that's a great point. This is for you. This is for the business owner. This is in your benefit to stay organized during the course of a year. When you sit down with a business owner for the first time, mm-hmm. when they've been referred to you and you sit down with them for the first time, what does that conversation look like?
Well, when it comes to taxes, and normally we look at the bottom line, and as usually is usually, okay, why am I paying this? Why did I pay last year this much? And they're all like, all like angry. And it's then it becomes the first thing is let me educate you what's happening here. And I go through every line item, and I can pick up right away, depending on what they're doing. I can pick up right away, okay, they didn't do this, they didn't do that. I can see that items like transportation, mileage, automobiles, there's no Section 179 full depreciation, there's no planning. So yes, you're paying $100,000 or 150 or 200 or whatever it may be in taxes. And there's the books are not handled. So we start going one step at a time as to, let me look at what's really going on. And then we suggest, like, depending on the size of the client, we will say, okay, first of all, we're going to organize your bookkeeping. That's where the root starts. Yeah. Okay. Once we get that organized, then we can see what is it that we can go next to do when it comes to the taxation, whether it's deferred compensation, whether we go into the housing and see how they're doing that, whether we create an administrative office so we can write off more other things. And we start studying all of that. Then after that, we say, okay, we've got to where we need to be, and nice enough, here's the result at the end of the year.
Yep.
And we do it. I mean, we do 200 grand, 250,000. We go into, not for the more sophisticated client who's paying a lot more, the deferred compensation. And there's actually a lot of other items that we try to research into. They come and go based on law. And we try to offer those to the people that are really up there on the taxation.
So on the doctor metaphor, that's your X-ray is when you sit down with them and go over all these things. And if a lot of people have had, I don't want to put this wrong, but a lot of people have had a tax preparer for a long time. And I think it's human nature, Sonia, that maybe things get a little sloppy over time, where you're not maybe asking quite as many questions because you think you know the business, you think you know the client. Well, life changes and priorities change. And so you always have to kind of stay refreshed. Do you like to meet with a business client fairly regularly?
I do, but they don't like it. I've got construction company that rather be on top of the roof of a building than talking to me.
Yeah.
So
I feel your pain. I know how that works.
Yeah. So and it's sad because that sometimes I get clients that they will assign it to their manager. And I'll sit down and we'll go over things like cash flow projections, or can I really get a new can I hire an employee? Some people need to understand, based on history, can I really do that? Yeah. So we have to make those changes, and assigning it to an employee works, but is not optimal. It's like you gotta sit there. This is in your heart. This is what you love. Yep. But this is such an important wheel of that. I mean, it's a financial part of it.
That's right. I call that the eat your broccoli, part, because it's not fun and it's not exciting, but boy, is it worth it. And I think that's, the one word that I use, whether it's, when I look at a business, and I'm looking at it top to bottom, everything from its financials down through, customer service and everything else. The word that keeps popping up is communication. And the reason is that there's so much information there that if you can't communicate well, you're going to leave something out. And so I implore business owners, small business owners, to have good communication with their financial people and their tax people at all times. And sometimes their tax people and their financial people are going to be communicating themselves, and they won't need you, but they're going to need you sometimes, and take advantage of it. So that's, so when they meet with you, then it's essentially an X-ray.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We have to look at the whole thing and what they're doing, how they're doing it. the bookkeeping, organizing them. At the end, all of them come through really, really nice. We've done a lot for them, but it's organization, getting things down to where they should be.
Yep.
And it takes a little bit of work, but once you get it going, it works beautiful. It's just like it's like an oiled machine, you know. It's like, now you know what to do. You would just put it on autopilot.
Oh, I love that too. I'm a big believer in systems. You know, just give me a system, and we'll run with it, because I don't want to think about this more than I have to, but I got to do it right. I have no choice.
Right.
Sonia, thank you so much for being with us. Sonia Narvaez has been with us. She's available to you through cpaaccounting.biz. What's your office number, Sonia?
407-382-6658.
Okay. And again, cpaaccounting.biz, and tell them Ryan sent you. And
yes.
Thank you so much for being here.
You, Ryan.
And thank you for joining us on the Business Owner's Guide to Money. Don't forget, you can reach me through alpha4business.com, alpha, the number 4business.com. And if you've lost Sonia's information, I'll get it to you myself. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.